Welcome to One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I'm your host, Dr. Wayne Pernell, Dr. P, the powerful presence mentor and outfluencer. With me today, I'm so excited. I'm going to put on my glasses to read this. I've got an amazingly special guest, Annette Brechbill. Her background is frighteningly amazing. She refers to herself as the original Travelocity gnome because of all the different countries she's not only visited but lived in. She's worked in hospitality, was a flight attendant, and then somehow became involved in foreign diplomacy. She trained attachés for overseas assignments and became a US diplomatic representative for the UK. And we fast forward to her representing some of the top speakers around the world and being the executive producer of TEDx Pearl Street in DC. Now Annette's slacking off a bit. Not really. She's stepped into she's stepped into like full on into the land of becoming an entrepreneur and is the founder and principal at the Brechbill Group, where she changes people's lives by connecting the right speakers with the right organizations. Annette, thank you for being here. So good.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, I am like the Rolling Stone that gathers no moss. And every time someone goes through my background, I always think, who is that person? And
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
Where is she gone?
You have quite a journey. Did I leave anything out? Probably.
I mean, like, how long have we got here? So,
Right.
No, that's like covered everyone. And thank you so much for having me here today. It's always a pleasure to connect with you, Dr. P.
It's so great. So the show is cutting through to what matters most, right? That's what One Sharp Sword is. In your journey, you have had to make some big decisions along the way. And you've also changed people's lives in doing so, right? So if you can think about some of the challenges you've had, some of the places, the turning points for you, because here's what happens for our audience, right? You will have takeaways for them. You will have the challenges you've had will be things that they can relate to. I can relate to, right? We all face these turning points. Talk about some of the big changes, big directional changes you've had, and talk a little bit about what that meant for you. What were you moving toward? Were you clear every step of the way? And then what, right? And then we'll talk about like where you are now and what you're doing to which is completely amazing also. So talk a little bit about your history and all the decisions you had to make to get here.
Well, that's quite a big question, and thank you so much. So anyone who's listening who might be playing Pick That Accent, I'm originally from Australia. I grew up on like a 1,000-acre cattle property in the middle of nowhere, Australia, in New South Wales. And when I finished high school, I'd always wanted to travel. So a couple of years after high school, I moved to the UK on a one-way ticket and sort of came home. I was supposed to come home about 6 months later and ended up coming home about 3 years later. And that was back in the day before everyone traveled with cell phones. So it was really traveling off the grid. And one of the biggest lessons that taught me was being responsible for yourself, making communication with people, even if you don't share a language, because there was no, Google Translate. So if you're in a country where English isn't the language and you don't speak that language, you kind of just have to figure it out through communication in some kind of way. So it's like radical self-responsibility.
That's huge. I love that. I'm going to take notes along the way too.
But also, you learn to embrace things that aren't going your way.
Oh,
So every time we'd be in a situation where we'd rock up to like a place, like a backpackers hotel, and they were out of rooms, or we'd missed the train somewhere, or we'd missed the bus somewhere, or something just like is going completely horrible, like camping and it's raining, we would always laugh and say, this will be the best story that we tell when we get back.
that's
This will
awesome.
be the best, like when we're sitting around in the pub with our friends back in London, talking about how was that trip, this will be the one story that we will tell. And that's a really good life lesson to learn in your early 20s, that all sucky things will pass, and perspective really does bring joy on nearly every situation.
I'm going to say that that's a lesson that it's not just stuck in your 20s. It's great to get that foundationally early on. But right now, I mean, as we're recording this, the world is on a stay-at-home order, basically, right? So for some, this is going to be a hugely oppressive time. This is the worst time ever. All the, I can't do this, I can't do that. And for some, this is going to be a story. Like, this is where I find me. This is uh the the radical self-responsibility piece right now, right? So that's awesome. Like, already huge lessons that translate. Beautiful. So
Well,
then
thank
what?
you. And I mean, that really has been the theme of most of my adult life as well, because after I finally went home, like that did actually happen, because there was always like one more trip to do while you were traveling and that sort of thing. So when I finally did go home, and then I was working as a wholesale travel agent in Australia, and then I ended up leaving that job, not of my choice, if I could say that. But I walked out of that office and I just felt so free. And it was because I had learned those experiences in my early 20s. I'm like, well, this isn't something that's bad. This is like a great opportunity for me to embrace. And if that hadn't have happened in that job in Australia, I wouldn't have applied to become a flight attendant in the Gulf, as one does quite randomly. And then I wouldn't have met my husband.
Wait. As one does quite randomly. I wouldn't have done this amazingly strange niche thing as one does quite randomly. That's awesome, right? And then that's where you met your husband?
Yes, yes. So I was living in Bahrain, working as a flight attendant. My husband is active duty Navy, and there's a big American Navy base in Bahrain. And so that's where we met. And so we would never have met if I hadn't have left that job. I and I think about several different times in my life where I'm like, oh my gosh, this really drastic change that was not of my choosing has come upon me. And because I have these examples in my life, I kind of trust the process, and you just keep moving through it. And I can more quickly, now that my age starts with a 4, I can even more quickly move to the point where I can look at things and say, what is this teaching me? And I truly do believe in that very Tony Robbins type of way, that life is happening for me, not to me.
Sure.
So it's all those perspective of all of those, times in my life that could have gone really badly that have actually worked out really well.
Amazing, right? And that's how did you get the resilient philosophy you have? Because you could have gone on your travels and things didn't go your way and you could have crumbled, right? It could have been like the world hates me, all that, like the messages that if you look for confirmation, you're going to find it. Confirmation bias, right? So if you're looking for confirmation that things are really out to get you, then you're going to find it. Somehow you found, and it might have even been Wayne Dyer before Tony Robbins, who talked about the world working for you. Somehow you found that, right? Do you know where that came from?
I mean, it might have been growing up on a 1,000-acre cattle property in the middle of nowhere,
Okay,
because
true.
that is also radical self-reliance, because, more than half of what we ate, we grew, or our neighbors grew, that we would, this sort of subsistence lifestyle that we kind of had. And if you were doing some kind of project around the property, around the farm, and that was on you. Like, there's no like calling the handyman to fix X, Y, and Z. You figure it out, and you have to make do with whatever's there, because to pop to the hardware store, that's over an hour's drive each way. So you either got it there or you don't got it there to be able to fix this problem. And so it really does give you the mindset of, "Oh, let's just figure this out." And still to this day, my husband credits me as being like the MacGyver of fixing things around the house. So
So great.
it's
That's
like
so
sort
great.
of like the puzzle solving of like, oh my gosh, there's this thing that I need to fix. How can I fix it like right now?
Here's a 5-year-old fix it. Um,
Hey, if you figure that out, let me know. I'm still working on that part of it.
that's awesome. Uh, so many bullet point worthy notes that I've taken already. This is great. Let's fast forward a little bit. You end up somehow moving from Bahrain. You end up in the speakers biz where you are, and maybe there's the diplomacy piece in between there, but you're now fixing people up, great speakers, internationally known speakers with major organizations, and also became an executive producer for a TEDx stage. And so these are the two pieces right before you decided to branch off and do what you're doing now. Talk a little bit about those transitions.
Oh wow. So the diplomacy piece kind of came first. Is so between children 2 and 3, which any mothers out there or any parents out there, you kind of bookmark your life as to between which child is that. So between children 2 and 3, my husband and I moved to London to take up a diplomatic post there, and my job there was to um, coordinate the logistics and scheduling for a lot of like the big conferences, like the last ever G8 that happened in Northern Ireland, NATO summit, presidential visits, 26 visits by Secretary Kerry, who seemed to be there every other week. And so it was a huge push out of my comfort zone. I'd gone from being stay-at-home mom to running around in heels, being one of the linchpins for the Secretary of State's team as they're doing high-level diplomacy in London. So it's a lot of make it work moments, and and breathing in and power posing and and realizing that, because I had such imposter syndrome when I first went into this job, going, oh my gosh, I don't have this fancy education. I'm just Annette from out in the country, right? And so I don't speak in the same kind of high level polished way that a lot of these people do. And what I realized is the skills of being able to just make it work, being able to keep my cool in situations, being able to connect with anyone, regardless of their rank or their circumstances or the jobs they needed to do. I was really able to connect with those people. And those are skills that I really polished as that backpacker traveling around, being radically self-reliant. So that was a job that I really enjoyed. And then, as military folk do, we moved back here to the DC area, and there was the change coming up in the administration. I'm thinking, what do all these people do when they leave the administration? And that's literally how I discovered the speaking industry. So I applied for and was very fortunate to be placed at one of the world's biggest speaking bureaus. And I feel like fate had drawn me to the speaking industry because I'm so passionate about like helping people tell their stories and really being part of creating that impact within culture. So
Mhm.
it was really cool. It was a great eye-opening experience to be able to do that. So yeah.
That's so yeah, just did that. It's kind of amazing to me that you're doing travel and then you're all of a sudden, just sort of happen to be coordinating major conferences for secretaries of state. And then you just happen to decide that you're going to apply to a speakers bureau. Um,
Yeah.
I, I don't see the natural bridge, but somehow it must have been in your circle, right? Somehow it wasn't just sort of like, well, I haven't done this before. I've never driven cross country in a semi rig. It's like you and now that I've mentioned it, you're going, oh, I haven't. I wonder if I
I have traveled from Istanbul to Cairo on an overland trucking camp. Does that count?
Yes, it does. All
Okay, all
right.
right. We can check that box too.
Okay. So here's what I got, right? That the ability to connect overrides any kind of imposter feeling that you've had. That your ability to connect people, your ability to connect with people, that you've not only been connecting, but you've been a connector, right? So that you are putting great people with great people. And somehow you have that perspective where, oh, this person needs to see this person, right?
Mhm. And
Um,
that really has been, that was the one secret source of the success of my position in London as a diplomat, was just looking at someone and go, oh, this person needs that person. And really being able to, yeah, it really is the connector. You've kind of nailed it there. And that's what I do in my day-to-day now.
so let's talk about now. Let's fast forward to, from the past, we bring us current. Um, you're working with amazing people. Um, I met you in a circle of amazing people,
Mm.
and it's been a pleasure. Still is a pleasure to to know you, to work with you. Um, talk about your work in. You now have a very select group that you work with. You've chosen that. So talk about how was it to start your own business? You moved from this pretty elite job. It was pretty special. And then you decided that you'd have an entrepreneurial seizure and go, well, if I can do it here, I can run my own business. So so talk about that, because that's not easy either, right? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you can do it as a business owner. And that is not easy. So talk about that too a little bit, because I think that is broad. Some of my audience are entrepreneurs and get this, that it's like, well, I'm good at X, I should be able to do it broad scale. And it's like, well, there are pieces that you need to know to do that. So talk a little bit about your journey into entrepreneurial uh, business ownership.
Well, wow. If people are tuning into this to learn how to be an entrepreneur from me, real sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, does anyone really? Let's just be honest.
Isn't that
I'm
great?
very aware of my own infancy stages
Yeah.
of bumbling through this world of entrepreneurship. And so every day is a learning lesson. And I am just sort of coming into my second year of owning my own business and really sort of taking it seriously. coming up to like the 18-month mark. And so I feel like I'm just starting to figure out exactly what my business looks like, because any entrepreneur who's listening may have gone through the same kind of experience. You go out with one vision and then it starts to morph and mold, and you've just got to, once again, like trust that process and listen to your instincts about what feels right, what's converting, what the future of your business will be. But yes, I did go from like my previous company, I managed 40 speakers that did a turnover of about $25 million a year. So it was a lot of like the heavy global hitters. And I now manage 4 people who I love and adore. And I have been really intentional about who I am moving forward with as far as representation goes. And the litmus test that I use for selecting my speakers is that if I can let my 3 kids who are under the age of 10 listen to one of their keynote speeches and they can get at least one takeaway from that, that's the kind of speaker that I want to work with. Whilst it was a privilege to work with a lot of people with heavy business or heavy military backgrounds or world leaders, or super wonky politicians. I feel like there's definitely a place for that in the world, and it's really important that those stories get told. But that's not what lights my soul on fire. What lights my soul on fire is diversity and inclusion and purpose and mindset and self-care and looking at things from a more holistic global aspect. So that's really how I kind of intentionally push forward with the speakers that I work with.
That's great. This is you living into your personal passion at this point, and that's the filter for your business. It's either a match or it's not, and it's not like it's not a judgment. If it's not, it's just not, right? It's not like, oh, this is a bad person or a bad speaker or a bad. It's just happens not to be a match. On the other hand, when it's a match, it's like, oh, this person fills my heart, which is fabulous, right? That's and I'm saying this for the audience to get that in your business, you get a choice, right? In business, in your daily life, you get a choice, and you decide what fills you, what doesn't fill you. You decide what's in and what's out. And most people who are struggling don't have that filter. They're like, will this get me to the next place? Will this get me to the next place? It's like, no. The filter is this congruent? Am I living in alignment? And that is the key, I think, to true success. So that's a tribute to you and your biz. And being at the 18-month mark, you're really, really in business land, you're really at the tipping point, right? You've passed your first year, you're coming into your second year. The world is on a global shutdown. So speakers aren't really able to move to audiences right now. So that's a little challenge. And still there's this alignment. And that's huge, right? So
absolutely. Yeah, and it's a heck of a time to be in the speaking industry right now, gotta tell you. It's because I really the last 6 months has been the big uptick in my business, and now I'm pivoting again, which is okay because I can do hard things. This is going to be okay.
that's the message too. Wow, that is the message. It's that I can do hard things. I can do whatever's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, oh, I'm going to get through it. I'm going to be okay. This is going to be okay. It's more global than you, right? It's not just, I hope my business survives, right? It's not you've never, I don't know if you ever wallow. Like, do you get to do you ever get to a place of self-pity? Like most humans do, right?
Yes. Absolutely. But like as I'm getting older, I stay there less. Like everyone has those ups and downs. And I think that as we kind of go through life, if we're listening and looking for those examples in our lives, you can pop a little bookmark in there that you can kind of flick back to when things are hard. It's like, oh, I remember this other time when I was able to get through X, Y, and Z. This is going to be okay.
So
So
good.
definitely I still go there, but I have like all these little bookmarks that I can go back to where I've proven that I can get out of it. So
That's huge. That, by the way, is huge. Another learning point. Recognize that in your past, for each of us, we've done hard things before. In our past, we've done hard things. We've gotten through. So this is big. And now during this time of reestablishing whatever some sort of new normal will become, um, it's not just regional, it's going to be a global new norm.
mhm.
This is interesting. It's not frightening, it's interesting, right? And that's fabulous.
I totally agree with you. And just like I look for other places in my life for examples of, times that I can draw from to sort of pull me out, like, no, I did this, so I can do this other thing. Um, I love to look to other industries to find examples of, ways that other industries have pulled through it. And obviously the events industry is kind of in whiplash right now. And I've been thinking about, because every call I feel like I'm on with a client or my speakers or just anyone who is in and around the events industry, they're like, oh my gosh, when will things get back to normal? What does the rest of 2020 look like? What does
Mm,
beyond 2020 look like? And realistically, and I'm sure you'd agree with this as well, Dr. P, that if what normal means to you, and normal is such an annoying and subjective word,
agreed.
honestly. If normal means to you the way we were in January, I don't think we're ever going to go back there. I really don't think that the events industry as it existed in January is ever going to exist again. But I don't think that that's an altogether negative thing. And when I look to other industries, like if you have a look at like mom and pop brick and mortar stores, and have a look at what has been happening to that industry over the best part of a decade, there's a lot of similarities that the events industry can draw from that, except for rather than having a full decade to kind of ease into all of these changes, we've all got
Mm,
whiplash.
yeah,
Because it's coming down on us really within like a 4 or 5 week period.
yeah.
And so if we have a look at the way that mom and pop businesses were kind of before the current shutdown, they really had one of three things happen to them. Either they closed their doors for good because they were either unwilling or unable to adapt to change. And I think because of the speed of this, I've got lots of industry friends who it's just not humanly possible for them to pivot quickly enough. And I think sadly there's going to be some friends who may not make it through this, but others are pivoting and changing with everything that they've got, trying to like swim and stay afloat. And I'm kind of one of those people, like, going for it, really going for it. There have been like mom and pop brick and mortar stores who've gone 100% virtual, and I think that going virtual is going to be as great now
Mm.
as online shopping is. So we've already seen like a ton of people really putting all of their energies into innovating into the event space and making it more interactive. So I've even seen that in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I'm so excited to see what happens 6 months, a year, 18 months from now, because those events that go online in 2020, never to be seen in a convention center again, they may become some of the biggest badass events in our cultural history in a couple of years' time. So that could be really
Global,
cool to
right?
watch.
They're going to
And
be, right?
Exactly what you said. Like, it could be that they get to reach a much broader audience as well, because to get people to come out of their houses and go to a convention center, it's going to look like a whole new thing. Which kind of brings us to like that third type of mom and pop store. And when I bet you've got like somewhere like this in your community right now that you're really missing. And it's the kind of place that you walk into and you really feel like you are part of their family. They understand you. You are in community and part of a team. When you walk in there, it's the place where it's your go-to for networking. It really is your hub of social life. And I think that events, when they do come back out into convention centers, or when companies start hosting their annual events, that's really what people have got to tap into. Because there's no longer going to be room in the marketplace for some average conference where you rock up, you get a bag, a t-shirt and a lanyard, and everyone gives each other a high five, and you don't really learn anything. And there's tons of those conferences that might have been around. There's no longer space for those in the marketplace.
That's a huge declaration, right? That's a huge declaration that, your bag, your t-shirt, your lanyard, there's no room for that anymore. It's like, oh, that's awesome, right?
Because you think about how many like average mom and pop brick and mortar stores there were about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single one that survived Shopify, Amazon,
Right.
Starbucks. There's none of those average mid-sized stores. They just went away.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless your community is very small, in which case, that's where you're playing, right? You're either playing in a really small community where that is, my town where I live has just under 30,000.
Mm-hmm.
And we as a community actually voted not to have a third Starbucks come to town. They like, people boycotted it, right? There's two on different sides of the town. Third one, we don't need it. Main Street, our Main Street is very mom and popish, but it's shut down, right? And I seldom use the word but. Usually it's and, because it's an inclusive word. Here we had these stores where, I'd walk in and people go, "Hey, Dr. P," right? It was like cheers. They recognized me. No more. And I think your declaration is really, I think it's really accurate. I think we are that this is going to be the new way of communication, standard way. And I will miss the personal contact. I will miss the handshake and the hugs and and I think there will be room for that. I think there will be conferences, but certainly they'll take a different form. And there may be a small group, elite conference group, where the rest of it is broadcast broader, possibly. Yeah, interesting. It's when you're in the space of I wonder, right? I'm a big fan of curiosity, because curiosity keeps you out of judgment. And so it's like, I wonder what this is going to bring. And it's kind of exciting when you're in that space. What's next for you personally? What do you see yourself doing?
So next, I think short term, I am keeping things afloat with my 3 kids under 10. So that has become like part of my daily work day that I now need to work into like my scheduling and that sort of thing, as a lot of parents do. But for my speakers, I have been working closely with them to come up with offerings that are unique out in the marketplace, because just as there's no longer space in the market for average conferences, I don't think that turning your keynote into something that you just do to a camera is not really a virtual event. It's not really a virtual offering, and it's not good enough out there in the marketplace. Right. And so we are working on drilling into each one of my speakers, like their zone of genius, and creating something that is like incredibly unique to be able to offer out there in the marketplace. And so one of my speakers, she's an incredible purpose-driven CEO, and she started her incredibly successful fashion company during 2008. So she kind of knows what she's talking about when she's still taking advantage of downturns in the marketplace. So really it's the same core messages that we have been sharing for her before, but presenting it to the marketplace to really answer the pressing questions of the day is what we're pivoting to be able to do, and also creating extra materials to send out to clients ahead and also after that event. And someone like Janelle McCauley, who is a 20-year Air Force veteran, who teaches people how to keep their mindset in an optimal performance state. I mean, that's kind of relevant right now. You gotta,
Yes.
but also, I'm a military spouse. She is still a military spouse as well as being a veteran. And so we're so acutely aware of what it's like to have your loved one leave the house and be worried about their safety. And we understand what that does to personal relationships and how that affects the family units. So in addition to Janelle creating training for people who are the employees to keep themselves in a performance mindset and really, guard their mental state through this to be able to make sure they keep on producing. We're creating training that is specifically for the partners, kids, mums, dads, cousins, aunts, uncles of those employees to help them maintain their mental resilience and maybe just make their days 1% better, which is really, that's a win right now. But showing support to the family members, not just the employees.
Huge, big pivot. And that may be the new norm. That's it. That's awesome. That's really great. Annette, so much, so rich. What else? Like what what haven't I asked you?
I was probably like 1,000 questions, but I don't want to take up everyone's time. But I think that what everyone needs to be connecting to right now is keeping that sense of community. And you and I are both part of the same online community that is managed by the incomparable Trisha Brook in New York.
Yes.
And I have found real community and support within that particular group. And I'd encourage everyone to keep in community with like-minded people, because that's really how you're able to support each other and get through this, stronger together. Just even if it's 1%, I'll take that.
Right. Just that little bit. Awesome. If people wanted to read about you, learn more about you, and find out about some of the speakers, they would find you at
Brechbillgroup.com. It's BRECHBILL group.com. You can check out the 4 people that I am so privileged to represent on my website. I also do consultancy for people who are in the speaking industry who want to leverage their stories from either from the stage or from behind the camera, and what that looks like in a 2020 world as well. So please do either email me. All my contact details are on that website. And yeah, I'd love to hear from everyone.
Awesome. The your contact will be in the show notes.
Oh,
So
that's
good.
nice.
Annette, thank you for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. This is One Sharp Sword, Cutting Through to What Matters Most. I'm Dr. Wayne Pernell. With me today has been Annette Brechbill. Thank you again. So good.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.